Okay, so we are in week 8 of the 12 weeks of total immersion. And as I said, I believe I said this on the last webinar that we did, or the last conversation in week 7. I believe I said that I was going to switch gears just a little bit in this upcoming week and talk a little bit more about buyers, the buyer side of the business. You know, there is, people ask me all the time, what's the best way to build a real estate business? Is it listing based or is it buyer based? And I will say that there is no right answer. The reality is that some people seem to relate, respond, and work with buyers much better than others. And some people seem to relate, respond, enjoy working with sellers better than the other. Just remember, buyers buy off emotion, sellers sell off logic. So when you're presenting to somebody, like myself, if I'm presenting to somebody, I'm typically ultra logical, and I can back up most things with data. So that right there would be better suited for a listing presentation than a buyer presentation, because the buyer is looking a little bit more emotionally. They're trying to purchase a bigger home, a smaller home, a second home. In other words, they're buying an experience that they're going to buy this home, they're going to live in it, they're going to raise their family. There's a little bit more emotion into it, and they don't always make the decision solely on financials. But when you think about a listing, they pretty much are making decisions solely on financials. So that's why sellers sell off logic, buyers buy off emotion. So it just really depends on what you prefer to, or who you prefer to work with, or the type of scenario, that you prefer to work within. So, but I want to talk about buyers because we've been talking about generating listings quite a bit so far in the 12-week program here. So the title or the subject is getting buyers to move forward, or getting buyers to move forward faster is the conversation that we're going to have today. So there's, again, a ton of advantages with working with buyers. So I've got my notes here. I want to list a few of them. I've said so much about listings and the advantages. Let's talk about buyers for a minute. So a few advantages that you have with buyers. Number one, you can earn faster commission checks when working with buyers. Just a fact. It's more likely you will get a buyer lead who is ready to write a contract than it is you'll find a seller lead today that's willing to price their property that it will go under contract very quickly. In other words, like, it's more likely you'll trip over a motivated buyer that will write a contract within the next week than you'll trip over a seller who's so motivated that they'll write a contract, or they'll sign a listing agreement at a price that will get it sold within that same week. So the reality is, a lot of people kind of gravitate to buyers because there can be a shorter fuse between the time that they actually make their initial contact and the time that they actually go under contract. So that's one of the advantages and one of the things that's appealing to a lot of agents. The next thing is when you get a buyer and you close them down, you make a sale, if you ask them, you may actually find out that they have another property to sell. You cannot forget to ask people. When you talk to a buyer, you need to ask them, do they have something to sell? Now, I remember at one point, I used to ask the question. I'd get a buyer lead and I'd say, okay, well, congratulations. I'm assuming you already sold your whatever property you're living in now. Is that correct? And they would say, oh, no, we haven't sold it yet. Or they'd say, no, we don't own the home that we're in right now. So like me making the assumptions, oh, great, congratulations. I assume you've already sold the property you're currently living in. Is that correct? Like, making that one statement right there would fish out whether or not they had something they needed to sell or if they were renting. And you'll be shocked at how many times you're dealing with buyers and they have something to sell, but because they called you about a property that they would like information on and you never asked them if they had something to sell, well, they never told you. Remember, they don't know what they're supposed to tell you. They're just calling because they want some additional information. They didn't really know that they could start talking to you about listing, or maybe they have a friend in the business and they think, well, once I find something, I'll eventually call my friend. So by you asking that question when you're first engaging with a buyer, you're going to find listing leads. There's always listing leads out there within these buyer leads. The next one here is when you close on a buyer transaction, you have the opportunity for 3 transactions. Every buyer transaction that you close, over the lifetime, you should get 3 transactions, assuming you're going to be in the business longer than, say, 7 years. You're going to be in the business longer than 7 years. Every buyer contract in closing should equal 3 contracts. So you got to make sure that you nurture these buyers. You make sure that they're, that you treat them good as past clients. You stay in communication with them, because you sell them a property now, then you sell their property, the one that they just bought now. In the future, you sell that property for them so they can buy another property. See, you end up selling them today, and then 4 to 5 years later, they'll be thinking upsizing, downsizing, moving across town, moving downtown, moving, to the country. Who knows what they'll be thinking? But they'll start getting that itch again to do another transaction, and they'll sell the property. The key is majority of the time, I would say less than 15% of the time, does the client go back to the agent that sold them the property. And it's not because the buyer is dissatisfied with the service that was provided by the agent. It's because the agent stopped communicating to them after the transaction. You've got to be very careful. Like a post-closing nurture campaign for 4 to 5 years after the closing is one of the most important campaigns you can have as a buyer's agent, because that's where you get your second and third transaction, as well as all the referrals that can come from that business. So if we look at it, technically you should get 4 transactions from every buyer. You should get the buyer transaction today. You should get the listing when they decide to list, and you should get the buyer transaction after you sell the property, and you should get 1 referral. See, that's one of the benefits of working with buyers. But you have to take advantage of that benefit, and you have to take action to make sure that that happens. So if you want a buyer lead, and another thing that's easy about buyers, or I should say a few of the advantages, you can create buyer leads at will. Like if you want another buyer lead today, like you should never be in a situation that says, I don't have enough buyer leads. Because all you have to do, if you want another one, is you just have to go to Facebook Marketplace, put a post, go to Craigslist and do an ad, or hold an open house. I mean, Gary from Columbia shared with me about a success of one of the agents who had an open house, and I might get this wrong, but I feel like between 2 open houses, there were 18 buyer opportunities in 2 open houses that were done over last weekend. That's pretty extraordinary. So, I mean, that's quite a bit of buyer activity, a lot of momentum. I bet you out of those 18, there are also people in there that are going to need to list the property, because a lot of sellers do their research at open houses before they list their property. So a great thing about working with buyers is you can just turn it on and generate leads immediately without nearly as much effort as needed to generate a seller lead. So let's admit it though, or I will admit it, and I don't want to, skip over this, that working with buyers can also be frustrating. They can be frustrating, but my question to the group and my question to agents in the industry is this: is it the buyers that are frustrating, or is it the way we handle our buyers that's causing the frustration? Like, is it really our buyers? Is it frustrating to work with buyers, or is it frustrating to work with buyers the way we currently work with buyers? That's a very important question. Like, I'm always very careful at pointing the finger at someone else and saying, you're wrong. I have to, or you're bad. I have to look at myself sometimes and say, is it something that I'm doing that's creating this problem? Something that I'm doing that's creating this frustration? Or is it really them? More times than not, we actually control whether or not it's going to be a frustrating experience or not. And we control it by the actions we take, the conversations we have. So yes, most people around the industry say, oh gosh, buyers are so frustrating, but I really question it. I really question whether or not they're that frustrating or whether it's just something that we're bringing to the strategy that's causing the frustration. So let me give you an example. Agents are frustrated. They constantly tell me are frustrated when the buyers don't answer the call once we've called them. In other words, they've reached out to us, raised the hand, I'd like some information, then we call them back and they don't return our call. That's frustrating. Well, the key is we didn't call them enough. Now we don't realize that on the other side of this conversation is a buyer who's probably at work, maybe cannot take calls, shouldn't be taking calls. They were on the internet. They hit contact me on one of our websites. They didn't expect a call so quickly. So when the call came in, they had to let it go to voicemail. Or the call came in, they didn't recognize the number, so they let it go to voicemail. And then 5 or 6 more or more agents are calling them, and they don't even know who to call back. Is it really that they're avoiding talking to us, or are they just overwhelmed with the scenario? The reality is that we know it takes more attempts for an agent to reach a buyer after the buyer initiated the contact, in the beginning. It takes more attempts now than it ever has in the past in our industry. So are we frustrated with them not answering the call when we called them the first time? Or are we frustrated because we can't find enough time during the day to make the proper attempts that's necessary to get them on the phone? You see, there's agents out there that have set up systems to actually make 5, 6, 7 attempts the first day, the same day that they get that new lead, and they're getting 80 to 90% response rate. And then there's agents that don't have systems set up. They're frustrated because they're only getting a 20% response rate, meaning 20% of the people are taking the call when they call them. And that can be frustrating if you're dialing all these 10 numbers and you only get 2 of them to talk to you. But it's not them, it's our systems as agents. The next thing is agents are frustrated because the buyer wants to make a lowball offer. You've got to question this. I mean, do buyers really like to make lowball offers? I mean, the real challenge could be that most agents don't take the time to discuss the market and a proper strategy for making an offer and negotiating the right price. See, most agents live in this world and they run their business when they're working with a buyer and they say, okay, is this the one for you? Do you like this home? Yes. Would you like to make an offer? Yes. Okay, what would you like to offer? Like, there should never be, that question should never, I can't think of any scenario where the what would you like to offer would be a right question. That's a poor question for you to ask, because they don't know what they should do. So guess what they do? They default to a lower offer than they would have. See, it's like, if you went into the doctor and the doctor says, so, what would you like me to operate on? What would you do? You would probably say, well, I don't know if we need to operate yet. Because see, if you answered, well, my leg, but it was your arm, or you answered your arm and it was your heart. See the answer, like, you don't know, you have no confidence as to whether or not you know the right answer. So then you don't give an answer, or you say something to actually delay the decision, like, well, I don't know that we need to operate right now. The buyer, their version of this is when you say, so what would you like to offer? What would you like me to operate on? Well, their version is, so what price would you like to offer? They immediately default to a low price, just like you would default to no surgery. See, I question whether or not buyers like to make lowball offers, or if buyers think the lowball offer is the right strategy, since we as agents didn't offer any other strategy. So a buyer's really frustrated. Or if we would have offered the proper pricing or offering strategy, would they have listened to us? And there would have been no frustrations. And then, of course, third here are buyers are talking to other agents. Buyers are just talking to so many agents. They're not loyal. Well, keep in mind that for every buyer that you have that you're frustrated with that's talking to other agents, there's another agent that's frustrated that their buyer is talking to you. So it's not like it's only your buyers. It's all buyers are talking to other agents. And it's not because they're lacking loyalty. It's because they're on the internet. And it's so easy to email and ask a question or text a real estate agent. Like, they don't have to wait for us for 10 minutes. If we don't respond, they can just email somebody else. And when they email or text somebody else, now they're talking to multiple agents. Are they talking to multiple agents because they lack loyalty? No. They're talking to multiple agents because of the ease of talking to multiple agents. Now, the challenge and the frustration becomes is when they start using other agents. And then my question comes back to us as the real estate professional is, did we demonstrate our value? Are the buyers really disloyal, or do they choose somebody who they feel offers the most value? Now, from a real estate agent standpoint, it's more comforting to say the buyers just aren't loyal. It's not as fun to say, well, the buyers are talking to another agent because I haven't done my job. If you notice, everything that I'm presenting so far up to this moment has been about how the agent should accept responsibility for what's going on in their current relationship with the buyer. And the reason I want the agent to accept responsibility, because when you accept responsibility, then you can make a change. If we blame the buyer, we have nothing to change. We just hope the buyer will change. But when we accept that it's what we're doing that's creating this environment, then we can change what we're doing and create a different environment. But if we point the finger and say, you're the cause of this being the way it is, then you're a victim. I prefer to be a victor versus a victim. And the way you can be a victor instead of a victim is accept responsibility for what's taking place right now. And if you don't like it, change something that you're doing. Change the question. Change the conversation. Change the dialogue. So the subject today was, how do we get buyers to move forward faster? So I've got, maybe 7 different little bullet points that I want to mention. I believe it's 7, could be 6, could be 8. But number 1 is this: we must respond faster at every stage. Remember those frustrations? The buyers are talking to multiple agents. Well, when we respond faster and we're the first ones to talk to them, they're more likely to talk to only us or fewer agents as we move forward. So the first one, as I've said in many different scenarios and many different coaching calls and webinars, whoever wins the race to the lead has the better chance. But I said here, we must respond faster at every stage. When you get a lead, you've got to contact them within the first 2 minutes. If they don't answer, you've got to call them again. There's a technique that I've shared with so many of you over the past. Some of you, this may be new to, so it's worth repeating, is we have to use the double dial text technique. You just have to burn this into your subconscious mind. When you get a lead, you call them. Don't leave a voicemail the first time you call them. Hang up. If they don't answer, call them again. You're going to be amazed at how many people will pick up the phone on the second dial. If they don't pick up the phone on the second dial, go ahead and leave the message and then text them. Double dial text technique. It will change your life. This is a big statement. This will change your life, at least your financial life, in respect to your real estate business, because you don't have to, it doesn't cost any more to get more business. In other words, the same amount of leads that you're getting right now, that you're only talking to 25, 30% of them. If you use a double dial text technique, now all of a sudden you'll be talking to 50% of them or 60% of them. Like, just using that double dial technique can double the amount of people that you're talking to. See, it's great to get leads, but who cares if you get leads and you're not talking to them? So if you want your buyers to move forward faster and you want to move them through a cycle faster, we've got to make sure that we're responding faster. Now, I just shared with you respond faster when it comes to leads, new leads. Well, this should be respond faster when it comes to every part of or every stage of your relationship. You know, after you've had an appointment with them and they did not write a contract, how quickly will you call them back? See, you need to call them back faster, because after you've showed them multiple properties, if they're not thinking, if none of them inspired them to write an offer, what do you think they're doing? They're probably going back to the internet and looking at more properties on the internet. And if they just left you, and they must assume that you're probably showing them everything, and then they find something on the internet that you didn't show them, even though you purposefully know that property will not fit their needs. But the fact that you didn't know them, see, they don't know when they see the property on the internet that it doesn't fit their needs. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath on that side of town in this time frame or in this price range. Yeah, that fits my needs, right? They're looking so broad, but you may have already looked at this and know that it needs $50,000 worth of updating, and they don't have that money. But you know that because you've researched the property. But when they go back to the internet, they don't know that because they don't have access to that information. So what do? They get on the internet and they hit contact me with some other agent that may have that listing, and all of a sudden they're in another conversation. See, like, after you show property, if you want your buyers to move faster, then you've got to follow up with them faster. Call them, text them, check in with them. Like, you can assume that within a few hours after them looking at property with you, you can assume they're already on the internet looking again. So you need to go ahead and call them, text them, reach out to them within that 2-hour period of time and ask them, hey, since we've had the meeting, I don't know if you've gotten back on the internet and seen anything else that you have questions, but do you have any questions about what we saw or anything else that you may have seen on the internet? Like, get back in there. Get back in there quick. So you want to have more communication with your buyers if you want to move them through the sales funnel faster. The second thing here is you've got to set expectations up front. If you want to move your buyers faster, move them forward faster to a contract, you've got to set expectations up front. It's important to inform the buyers as to what to expect, and most important, what to do when certain things come up. Here's an example. Because the property you are looking for is very desirable, and there are many buyers waiting for the exact same property, it's critical that when I call you and tell you one's available, that we set a time and take a look at it immediately. See, I'm setting expectations here. I'm saying, hey, look, what you're looking at, other people are looking for. So when one comes on the market, there's going to be a lot of competition. It'll get flooded with showings. So when I call you and let you know that something's come available, it's going to be important we drop what we're doing and we go out and take a look at this property. Does that sound good? Now, I won't waste your time. I'm not going to call you and say drop what you're doing if it's a property that I feel doesn't fit your needs. But if I do call you and say, hey, we need to drop what we're doing and get on out here, then just understand it's because I've done my research, I've done my homework, and I'm trying to beat the competition so you can get a quality property at a discounted price or a good price. How's that sound? See, that would be managing their expectations or setting expectations that we've got to move fast, creating urgency. Here's another one. There'll be a lot of competition for the property you like when it comes on the market. To make sure you get a quality property at a good price, we need to be ready to make a fair offer right from the start. Low ball offers are rejected nearly every time these days, or at least on the properties that you're looking at. See, if you have those questions, if you have that conversation earlier on in your relationship, what you're doing is you're setting expectations. So when they do find a property that comes on the market, they go out and meet with you fast, because you do. If it's a good property, you do need to get there fast, or another buyer's going to beat you to it, or going to be in multiple offers, which slows the process down. So the way we move people faster through this funnel is we get them in the properties faster. But you also want to set expectations on offers and lowball offers. You want to make sure that they know that, hey, look, for the type of properties that we're looking at, lowball offers are pretty much getting rejected every time. I'm going to make sure I protect you and do everything we can so you don't overpay for the property. We're just going to look for a great property and be willing to pay a fair price. That kind of conversation right there, even though there's no decision to be made at that moment, setting those expectations early in your relationship will pay high dividends later on in the relationship. The next thing here is buyers must understand. This one, Jan Pittman just shared this with me, and I had to add this to the notes today. Buyers must understand that time is their enemy. Time is their enemy. Like so many buyers think, oh gosh, I've got plenty of time. And that can be frustrating for a real estate agent, because you probably know that we don't need to take all this time to find you this property, right? But buyers sometimes just feel like they have all this time. They don't know why time is an enemy to them. See, the longer it takes for them to buy, especially in today's market where inventory levels are low, the longer it takes them to buy, the more money they pay. It's as simple as that. The longer it takes for them to buy, the longer or the more money they pay. So time equals higher price. Interest rates are incredibly low. Like I can't even fathom what's going to happen when interest rates go up to 5%. Now, and I don't know when that'll be. Heck, it might be 20 years. It might be 2 years. I don't know when it's going to be. But just understand that when you look at interest rates and you see how low they are, they're not likely to go lower, and they're more likely to go higher. If they pay over time, if interest rates go up and then they buy, now they're buying at a little bit more price, and they're paying a higher price for their mortgage, meaning more interest. So not only do they pay a little bit more money for the property, they pay a little bit more money for the loan. That's a double whammy. See, time equals higher interest rates. And then the third one is time. Over time, there seems to be less inventory. So now what does that mean? Supply goes down, demand remains the same, a little bit higher price. Because if supply is low and demand is high, that tends to lead to increasing prices. So we've got time equals higher price, in the form of sticker price. Time is higher interest rates, and time less supply, less to choose from, which also equates to higher price a lot of times. But the key is, it's just less to choose from. These are things that you have to talk to the buyers about. Just say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, just want to let you know and talk to you a little bit about time. Because obviously you probably don't have to buy, so you have plenty of time to buy. But a few reasons why time, it works against us in today's market is, right now, the inventory is so low that, the longer it seems, the longer it takes to buy, it seems the higher the price a buyer has to pay, because more inventory sells off and prices go up. The second reason we have to think about timing is because right now interest rates are at this level, and we know historically this is about as low as they can go, and we anticipate that over time they'll go up. Now, I don't know how long that'll be. It's a guessing game, but we pretty much know your time's not going to make them go down. Time would only likely make them go up. So in both of those scenarios, the longer it takes to find a property, the more money you can pay. Now, I'm okay whether you buy a property today, or I'm okay if you buy a property 1 year from today, but as a professional real estate agent, I just wanted to make sure you understood where the market is in respects to timing and pricing. See, I'm just sharing this as education. Now, most agents will listen to what I'm saying and say, well, gosh, you're just trying to, get them, this is a way to get them to buy something real fast. No, it's not a way to get them to buy something real fast. It's a way for me to protect my buyer and making sure that they're not paying too much for a property. Because the cost of the property today is one thing, and the cost of the property in 6 months from today is one thing plus a little bit more. What is my ultimate job? My ultimate job is to protect them. Time is an enemy. Time is not their friend. The next thing here is ask more questions on the front end. If we want to move buyers through the sales funnel faster, we've got to ask more questions on the front end. Like make sure you're asking the right questions. Like, why are you buying? Now, you don't want to ask that like, why are you buying? Like, you're kind of crazy for buying. You want to just say, hey, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, what's your motivation to actually purchase a home right now? Finding out why they're buying is finding out their motivation. When would you hope to be moved? Ideally, in a perfect world, when would you like to be moved in and occupying your new home? Do you need to sell something before you can purchase? A question that you can ask is, what must you have in your next home? And then you could ask the follow-up question, now based on everything that you just shared, what's the one or two things you could do without if you found a property that fit every other need and was the right price? So it's an interesting question. Like, when you ask somebody, what do you want in a home? They're going to give you a very long list in the beginning. But notice over time, they start to refine that list over time. And instead of having 20 things, they have 10 things that they've got to have or they just won't do the deal. Well, what if you actually got through that conversation like within your first one or two conversations with them versus figuring that out after the 15th property you showed them? The way that you do that is you just ask them. So you can say, hey, what are the things that you must have in the property? And based on everything you just shared right there, assuming you could get a really good price on a property, what are a few things that you could actually do without as long as the price was right? Well, we could probably do without the fence and just kind of do that later on. Because we don't have a dog yet, but we're just thinking about getting a dog. Now, all of a sudden, that opens up a whole new world of possibilities on what they can buy. And the fact that they say to you, we could do without these things, now all of a sudden it makes it a little bit easier for you to help them find that perfect property. See, it's like, I asked my kid, what kind of ice cream you want? Well, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, mint chip. Then we're in the ice cream store. It says you can have one flavor. What do you want? Chocolate. It's like the list, when we're driving, well, maybe I'll get chocolate today. Maybe I'll get strawberry today. Maybe I'll get this today. Maybe I'll get to that today. But then we end up in the ice cream store and it's decision time. They're like, well, chocolate or vanilla? I'll take chocolate. See, the closer we get to the transaction, the more narrow our list of wants and needs become. What I'm suggesting is we try to narrow that list down in the beginning of our relationship instead of thinking it's going to take a month before we figure this out in 15, 16, 20 showings. Another question, I understand you have in your mind to buy in 6 months. Let's say somebody says, well, we're really just thinking about buying 6 months to a year from now. You say, hey, I understand you have in your mind to buy 6 to 12 months. But I do assume that if you were to find the perfect property right now, meaning priced and the price was right and you had everything in it, it had every benefit and feature that you were looking for, I assume you could move that up a little bit sooner. Is that correct? Like if they tell you that they're 6 months out, then just ask them, if you found this, could you move it up a few months? Majority of the people can move it up. When they say I'm 6 months out, They just, it was like a blank. I'm blank months out, and they had to fill in the blank. So they randomly chose a number. Now there will be times where somebody will say, well, no, the job relocation is not to this time, so we're just doing our preliminary looking right now, but we really can't write a contract until this one thing. There could be a condition, that could exist, but the majority of the time, when somebody tells you I'm 6 months out, you could say, if I could find you something that fit this and that, and it was priced right, I'm assuming you could move it up a few months. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Ask those questions on the front end, and that'll help you move people through the process. And on the last one here, under asking questions, okay, I understand you want to offer $100,000 for the home. I think we both know that may be a bit lower than it's worth and lower than what most sellers would take. Are you prepared to go up a little bit once the seller makes a counter offer? Like, don't wait for the counter offer to ask the buyer to go up. Make an assumption there's going to be a counter offer and go ahead and present that and ask if they're willing to make a little bit more of a move. Are you prepared to go up a little bit more, once they make a counter offer? Yeah, I mean, we got to start somewhere, but yeah, we'll go up. Okay, good. See, I just want them to say that, because then when the counter comes, we've already talked about what will happen when the counter comes. Like, when the counter comes, they've already agreed that they would go up. Like, the right time to ask them if they've got some flexibility, if they'll go up a little bit, is when they can answer it without consequences. See, when you get a counter offer and you present it to the buyer, then there's a consequence to them answering the question. It's no longer a hypothetical. It's a reality that they've got to make the decision, and with that decision comes, consequences. Consequences, they lose the property or they get the property. So if you'll go ahead and address that dialogue, have that dialogue when there's no threat, when there's no consequences to them answering, you'll get more of the people to say, yes, we just had to start somewhere. You never know what they'll do, but we kind of plan to go up a little bit more from here. Pays you high dividends in negotiating. What you want to do, see, when you get into negotiations, if you want to move these buyers through the process, you don't want to write offers, it fails because of negotiations, write another offer, doesn't get negotiated out. You want to write an offer and get it negotiated, get it ratified. That's a little technique on how you can help them get through the process quicker. Now, on questions, last thing on questions. There's a difference in asking questions and having a conversation. So asking questions via a conversation versus an interrogation. So when you're asking a lot of questions, just make sure that it's conversational. It's not like, why are you buying? When do you have to be moved? Do you plan to, it's not just like a checklist. It's got to be a real conversation, or else it comes across as an interrogation, and then they won't really give you good answers. You sometimes have to ask some of these questions, by the way, over the first one or two conversations. Like, you may not be able to get all these questions asked in the first conversation when you just get the lead. You may ask, just kind of curious, what's motivated you to start looking at property? Why are you buying at this time? You could ask that during the first conversation. Some of the other ones may come after the first meeting. The key is ask a lot of questions if you want to move these people through the process faster. The fifth one, be intentional about follow-up. All follow-up must have a call to action. Like, hi, John, I sent you an email with a new property. Can you take a look at it and call me real quick? Like, that would be a great text to send somebody. Hey, John, sent you an email with a new property on it. Can you take a look at it and call me real quick? Like, that would be a great way to set up follow-up. Not like, hey, John, just give me a call whenever you can. Just wanted to touch base. Hey, just touching base, see how you're doing. Call me if you need anything. Poor lead follow-up. Hey, John, I just sent a link to a new property. Please take a look at it and call me when you get when you get a chance. Great lead follow-up. For your A buyers, your really great buyers, your hottest leads. I suggest that you set up, because you probably have them set up on some property alert. You need to set up yourself on the same alert. So if you've set them up on an alert for this one community, 3 bedrooms priced between $200,000 and $250,000, then you need to set up a search, that same search criteria, so you get alerts every time that a property comes on. Now, why do we do that? We do this because you will then know every time they got an alert. So if you're getting an alert every time they're getting an alert, then you could then, when you see that alert, you can then text your buyer, hey, I just saw this property. I had it sent to you really quick. Take a look at it and give me a call. See, that's the type of communication that'll get these buyers moving through the funnel faster. Now, I say you only do this to your A buyers, because if you had 100 buyers, 200 buyer leads, old leads, and they're all getting alerts, or 500 and they're all getting alerts, this could be overwhelming to you, right, on how many alerts you would get. So only have this set up for your A+ buyers. Like, have 10 buyers set up like this. You should take your top 10 buyer leads and set up this system for those 10. Now, what you can do, usually when you set up a search like this, a notification or an alert search like this, you can give the name. You can name the search, right? So what you do is you name the search your client's name. Okay, so if you're going to name the search and your client is John Doe, then put John Doe's name in the title of the search. So when you save the search, it may have 3 bedroom, 2 bath, John Doe. And then you have 3 bedroom, 2.5 bath in this community, Jane Doe. So then when you get an alert, then the title comes in Jane Doe, John Doe, Ken, Greg, Lori, Jill. So then you can immediately know who that alert went to. See, you being alerted that quick on your top leads will help you move them through the funnel, because it's going to improve your response time and the quality of your communication and the value that you're delivering, the perceived value that you're delivering, at least from the eyes of your buyer client. Number 6 here, more education. So we've got 2 more here and then we'll get out of here. Number 6, more education. We want to move them through the funnel faster. You've got to educate the buyer. Too often agents are talking too much without educating the buyers. Let the buyers know what the average list to sales ratio is in the market. Let the buyers know how competitive the market is for properties like they want. Let the buyers know that low ball offers typically end up in the buyer paying more than if they made a more fair offer up front and held closer to their original offer. Like, these are all things that we know. See, when we know in a community that the list to sell ratio is 97%, meaning they only come off 3% on average, to offer 10% below asking price, assuming that the list price was fair, is probably a waste of time. And in today's market, lowball offers get penalized. I could make a lowball offer with buyer A and a reasonable offer with buyer B, and more likely than not, the lowball offer will get more resistance in the negotiation and never get the best price from the seller. Because see, the buyer makes a lowball offer, so then the seller reciprocates by making a less than worthy counter. The buyer number B makes a fair offer, so the seller makes a fair counter. It's not just raw numbers. There's emotion going on in the negotiation. It's not black and white. Well, they offered $1. I'm asking $2. They asked $1. We'll meet in the middle at $1.50. That's not how negotiations go in real estate. That might work at the flea market, but it doesn't work in real estate. Because if I'm offering, my property at $5 and you're asking it at $1, then you just offended me. So I'm going to reciprocate by telling you I'll come down to $4.79 because I do want to come back and respond with a counter, but I'm going to show you that I can be ridiculous just like you, or I'm going to punish you for making such a lowball offer. I'm going to make a less than counter. So you got to understand, like, sometimes you have to actually put your buyers in a seller's mindset. Meaning, hey, look, if you were the seller, what would you feel a reasonable first offer should be? Ask your buyer that. Mr. Buyer, I'm just kind of curious, if you were the seller, it's priced at $200,000. If you were the seller, what do you think a fair first offer would be? I didn't say fair offer. I said fair first offer. Why did I say fair first offer? Because I want to plant the seed that there might be more than one offer here. We may be going back and forth a little bit, but I would like them to think about it. If they were in the seller's shoes, what offer would they want to see that would make them feel like the buyer was being fair? See, sometimes what a buyer will tell you, what they feel is fair. Hold on one second. Sometimes what a buyer tells you what they feel would be fair if they were a seller will be higher than what they think is fair as a buyer. And once you kind of bring that to the dialogue, watch how your buyer will make a better offer. See, they sometimes don't think that they're going to offend the seller. They're not thinking, well, how is the seller going to feel with this offer? They're just thinking, me, 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 me. I want to protect myself and get the best price. They're not thinking how it's going to impact the seller and the negotiation. So when you ask them if they were the seller, what would they expect would be fair or think would be fair? Now all of a sudden they start thinking about the impact of that offer. They start thinking about, like, really negotiating this thing out. The last one here. So again, let me finish the more education. I got a couple more points here. When an agent fails to educate the buyer makes a bunch of assumptions. They do this to protect themselves. See, if a property is priced at $200,000 and you tell the buyer to come in close to full price, the buyer may offer $194,000. If you say nothing to the buyer about what they should do, they will likely offer $185,000. The buyer is doing this because they don't know what they should do, so they go lower to protect themselves from making a mistake. The reality is they have no idea what they should offer, so we have to tell them. Now, we may tell them and they may do something slightly different, but what the amount or the price that they offer, though it would be different than we tell them, will be higher than if we don't tell them. So sometimes just moving the buyer faster through this sales funnel and getting them to contract has a lot to do with when they make that initial offer and what price they put on that initial offer. It influences so much. It influences how the other agent's going to present the offer to the seller. It influences how the agent is going to communicate back and forth with us as agents. It influences the way the seller feels about the buyer and how the seller's going to actually respond and the amount that they're going to counter at. It'll actually, and if it goes an additional counter, it'll just, those feelings of the buyer is making a lowball offer, it'll continue every single time we go back and forth in an encounter. So like setting it up, that offer from the beginning and doing it right and getting them to present a fair offer from day one or from, when they throw out that first pitch is critical. You can actually get so many more buyers under contract at a fair price, not by them paying more. You can get so many more buyers under ratified contracts if we'll just set it up properly in the beginning so we don't offend the other party and then we end up losing the transaction because of emotions. Last but not least, stop following for smoke screens. I am just looking. So, I'm just kind of looking, just wanted some information. Just say something like this. So, great. One thing we know for sure that all home purchases start at the looking stage. So tell me what your dream home looks like. Just like, it's probably just a smokescreen. Well, we want this, we want that, we want that, but we're still not really ready for another 30 days. Well, another 30 days, that means they're a real buyer. They're doing more than just looking. They're researching. So don't fall for the I'm just looking. I'm looking to buy. I'm not looking to buy until next year. Yeah, hey, no problem. Whether you buy today or whether you buy next year, I'm still going to be here and love to earn your business. Of course, I'm assuming if you found something that met all your criteria and you could get a really good price on it, a good buy on it, you'd probably move that up a little bit, wouldn't you? Or you could. Well, yeah, I could move it up some. See, you just got to make sure that you don't fall for all these smoke screens. I'm not sure we can afford this one. Well, if the payment, let me ask you this. Have you calculated what the payments would be? I assume if the payments were low enough where you could afford it, on a monthly basis, that would probably work for you, right? Well, yeah, that's the thing. We can only afford so much per month. Okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that. What's your ideal monthly payment? Well, it's $750. Okay, if you could find a really good property, maybe it was a little bit undervalued, could you go up as high as $775? Well, yeah, 750 to 800 will be okay. Now, the difference between 700 and 800, that's $100 on a payment. You realize that could be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in purchase price? See, I'm not sure if we can afford this one. Yeah, that's not it's a smoke screen, but the reality is that's saying, hey, I don't know how to calculate mortgage payments, so I don't really know if I can afford this one. It's not saying I doubt I'd want to buy this one. It's saying I don't know how to calculate. That's where the agent comes in. And then, of course, that's a bit more than I think we should pay. Well, then you go again, calculate their mortgage payments. Start asking them, say, hey, look, I understand the seller and the buyer. I understand you guys are $2,000 apart. But let's face it. You've been looking in the market. You've seen that the prices have went up lately. Is that correct? Yeah, do you anticipate the market going up or down over the next couple of years? Up. Okay, so because they'll all say that. Any buyer doesn't say, I'm buying, yeah, I can't wait to buy today, and I believe the market's going to crash. Like, the buyer's never going to say that. When you ask a buyer, yeah, I'm just kind of curious, in your opinion, do you think the prices are going to go up or are they going to go down over the next couple of years? Well, it looks like to me things are going to go up. Yeah, well, good. And that's probably one of the reasons that you're making a decision to purchase right now. Is that correct? Yes. Well, look, you and the seller are $2,000 apart. Let's face it, in the next, say, you're going to live here for how long? We'll probably live here for at least 5, 7, 8 years. Okay, so let's just fast forward 5, 7, 8 years from now. Do you think the $2,000, paying $2,000 more is really going to have any impact at all on your investment? No, because it won't. It won't. Like, if $2,000 is going to have that big of an impact, then they shouldn't probably be buying no matter what the price is. But when they say these things to you and you throw those questions back at them in a conversational way, then they'll start to see that some of the things that they're saying, they're just saying it because maybe they're scared, maybe they're uncomfortable, they're out of their box, and they're just like, okay, when I feel uncomfortable, I'll just claim that I can't do something. But then when you bring them back to that this is really not that big of a deal, all of a sudden they move forward. Today's conversation is all about getting your buyers to move forward through the sales funnel faster. We're not talking about gimmicky sales strategies. We're not talking about manipulation. We're talking about understanding how to help your buyers navigate through the many fears that they're going to experience through the buying process. And the way that you will calm them down is through great conversations. So I hope that you've found some value in what I'm sharing with you today. I've got a lot of good notes here. I'll do a recap, later on the week, just to kind of, kind of remind us of this. And then, of course, my staff, Tammy, will be sending this out to you via email if anybody wants to listen to it again and maybe pull some of the scripts and dialogues that I role played through the webinar. Thank you so much for showing up, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.